Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the Ministry of Defense for holding this important conference and for inviting me to participate. Before I begin my remarks, I want to stress that I am speaking not as an official or unofficial representative of the Trump administration. What I'm about to present are solely my own views as an observer of American foreign policy with some experience in the U.S. government, including at the White House. Now, the Trump administration, as we all know, has been in office for only 3 months. It does not have fully formed policies, even on the issues that dominate the U.S. foreign policy agenda: North Korea, Syria, counterterrorism, the nonproliferation of weapons of mass destruction. I would stress that this is not unusual for a new administration. An incoming administration likes to review policies, a process that takes several months. We generally do not see well-formed policies until the summer after the inauguration at the earliest. What makes this administration particularly difficult to read is that President Trump is in many ways an outsider as far as the two dominant parties in the United States are concerned. He is not drawing on the traditional stable of foreign policy experts from either the Republican or the Democratic Party that would give us a clearer sense of where he wanted to take policy. Moreover, during the campaign, he challenged foreign policy orthodoxy that had formed in the United States in the years after the end of the Second World War, especially with regard to American allies in Europe and in East Asia, and his warm words for President Putin and his expressed desire to work more closely with Russia set him apart from more mainstream political thinking in the United States. That said, his picks for key national security posts, Secretary of State Tillerson, Secretary of Defense Mattis, National Security Advisor McMaster, all fall within that mainstream. And they have tended to give Trump's policy so far a more traditional cast. In the past month, President Trump has reconfirmed America's commitment to NATO, and earlier had assured Japanese Prime Minister Abe of America's support. Looking forward, it is probably true that President Trump's policies will mark more of a continuation of conventional American security policy rather than a radical vape. And in this, he will be following the path of his predecessors, who sharply criticized outgoing administrations during presidential campaigns, only to build on their policies once in office. Where he'll want to break with President Obama is not so much in goals, but tactics. He wants to appear decisive where he believes President Obama hesitated. In particular, he appears more inclined to wield the military in a demonstrative way than Obama was, although he too will be wary of committing forces to ground combat anywhere in the world, absent a direct challenge to America's vital interest. Likewise, he also believes he derives some benefit from being unpredictable, unlike President Obama. And we see these attributes in some of President Trump's recent actions. North Korea. North Korea has risen to the top of the agenda in the United States. There was a widespread view shared by Republicans and Democrats alike that this problem would prove a central one this year, given the speed with which North Korea is developing its nuclear capabilities and long-range ballistic missile technology. Any American president would have said that North Korea's development of a missile with a nuclear warhead capable of reaching the United States is unacceptable. So not surprisingly, President Trump is now focused on making sure that that cannot happen. There are three elements that have defined his approach. First, he has reassured America's allies, Japan and South Korea, that the United States remains committed to their defense and to a prominent role in the region. Second, he seeks to persuade China to step up pressure on the North Korean regime to freeze its nuclear program as a step toward negotiating its final dismantlement. That, I believe, was a major goal of his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping earlier this month, and he appears to have had some success. At least China appears to be stemming the flow of financial resources to Pyongyang. And third, Trump has put the use of force back on the table as a real option to incentivize China to act and to demonstrate to North Korea the risk of its present course. Now, it's much too early to say whether this approach will bear fruit. We're going to watch this very closely, obviously, in the coming weeks. With Syria, and more broadly, the Middle East, President Trump needed to demonstrate that the United States would be engaged in a serious way. The strike against Syria for use of chemical weapons demonstrated that, and has caused all countries in the region to recalibrate their policies, no matter what they think about the chemical attack itself. The American strike, I would stress, is not necessarily a prelude to further attacks. However, but it was at least in part intended to get Moscow's attention, and I believe it did. My sense is that President Trump himself would still like to find a way to cooperate with Russia and Syria on the counterterrorism activity. But a condition for that will be Moscow's willingness to pressure Assad to act with greater restraint. Even then, it will take considerable time to come up with a formula for satisfactory counterterrorism cooperation. I think we need to be frank in this regard. The different assessments that the two countries have of the situation on the ground in Syria and the profound distrust that exists between the American and Russian militaries and special services does not allow for an easy path forward to cooperation. But there is a way if we have the will to do it. Syria, as we know, is embedded in the larger struggle in the Middle East over the shape of the future order. Trump has reached out to reassure America's traditional allies, including Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, that the United States will play a role in this part of the world. The rhetoric against Iran has been harsh, as it was during the campaign, and the administration is clearly looking for other ways to put pressure on Iran. But that said, President Trump appears to have backed away from his pledge during the campaign to tear up the nuclear deal with Iran. That much, I believe, is going to stay in place. In this uncertain situation, the United States and Russia should be discussing the future order in the Middle East as part of an effort to bring the Syrian crisis to a satisfactory and enduring resolution. These two countries, of course, cannot alone determine a new order. The regional powers, Egypt, Iran, Israel, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, will play prominent roles. But American and Russian cooperation is critical to reducing the tension in the region and minimizing the extent to which the instability there spills over into Europe, Russia, and other neighboring states. Finally, the conflict in Afghanistan. It's not going to go away anytime soon. As former Afghanistan President Karzai said yesterday, it is only getting worse, as ISIS is gaining a foothold and the Taliban is gaining in strength. In these circumstances, Russia and the United States should be considering ways to cooperate against the emerging ISIS threat and limiting the spillover into Central Asia. And given the immediate consequences for them, the states of Central Asia and the CSTO should also participate in these discussions. It is now commonplace to say that U.S.-Russian relations are at their lowest point since the end of the Cold War. The differences between the two countries are indeed significant on questions of world order and in assessments of current conflicts. But the conflicts will not be properly managed or satisfactorily resolved without Russia and the United States engaging one another. And the two countries need to discuss the foundations of world order, of which they are both essential pillars. The sooner that discussion begins, in my mind, in a serious way, the better off we're all going to be. Thank you.